in order to influence change in any organization, if you don't have diverse people, that's women, that's people of color, that's LGBTQ+, if you don't have that representation in your leadership, then you're doing your organization a disservice, because there's no way you can understand what the challenges are and how to combat them.
That was Kristin Weeden, Chief Talent Officer at Penske Entertainment, talking about how she and her team are working hard to ensure their leadership provide an inclusive culture and workplace experience for their employees and their fans of the sport of racing. And this is IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Kristin, welcome to the third anniversary episode of IBJ's podcast, The Freedom Forum, with me, Angela B. Freeman. As you know, 2024 has been a record-setting year for Indianapolis, huge sports, culture, and entertainment events. And all this year, I've been speaking with the forces behind Indianapolis major sports organizations. And of course, there is nothing more instrumental to Indianapolis's legacy as a sports capital than the greatest spectacle in racing, right? The Indy 500 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But before we get started on that, will you please tell our listeners a bit about you, your educational and professional background, and any other factors that have led to you becoming the Chief Talent Officer of Penske Entertainment, which includes IndyCar, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and IMS Productions?
Thank you so much, Angela. I appreciate you having me on, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be here. In terms of my journey from an educational perspective, I started my educational career at HBCU, Virginia State University, so go Trojans. I finished my bachelor's degree at Chicago State University with a bachelor's in political science. I went on to get my master's in sports administration from Indiana State University right here in Indiana. From there, just kind of started my career journey. I think my first professional opportunity, while I was in graduate school, I got a job with the University of Indianapolis as a residence hall director. That allowed me to move to Indianapolis. I needed a bigger city because I went to Terre Haute to go to my graduate program. And so I'm a city girl. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised, south side of Chicago. So needed a different opportunity than what was happening in Terre Haute for many reasons. Found an opportunity at the University of Indianapolis. So that was kind of my first kind of paraprofessional opportunity. When I graduated with my master's degree, I got a job with the NCAA. Back then, it was kind of called the Clearinghouse. It's now known as the Eligibility Center. Actually, they were rebranding it when I was employed there. So that was my first professional job out of grad school, and it was in sports in a way, right? The NCAA. And in that space, you think, wow, like right out of grad school, I get a job with the NCAA. It's awesome. And it was, and I did that, but I was working both of those jobs. So the residence hall director job and the NCAA job, I ended up doing them both full time for 2 years. And I remember probably within the same week or two of each other, my directors at the time both kind of called me in their office and said, "Look, Kristin, you are like gonna die. Like you are killing yourself. You cannot keep doing this. You've got to choose." And they both offered me a promotion opportunity. And I ended up taking the job at the University of Indianapolis, which, when I think back, it was an interesting decision because, again, I just got a degree in sports management. When you are in Indiana and looking for opportunities in sport, you want an NCAA, you want a Pacers, you want an IMS, you want an IndyCar, we have so many sport opportunities in this state. And it's still highly competitive and really hard to be in that space. And so the idea that I would leave it was really interesting. When I look back, I understand now that I left based on culture and what was a really good fit for me. I loved the space I was in with the University of Indianapolis. I loved the work that I did. I loved working with the students. And then long story short, I ended up kind of working my way up through the University of Indianapolis, started again as a residence hall director when I left. In 2016, I was Associate Dean of Students and Student Affairs. So I oversaw all of residence life, housing, conduct, Title IX, our Student Business Center, did some DEI work on that campus, really kind of pioneered DEI conversations and programming on that campus. In my last few years there, I started to be recruited. Let me back up. There was a young lady that I met while working at the NCAA. She was an attorney. She was going to law school at the time. We were both kind of hustling, grinding, and doing our thing. And we just always stayed in touch. And she called me one day and she said, hey, I know you're doing a lot of good DEI work on the campus at UND. We've got this diversity opportunity coming open. Would you be interested? And I was interested. And so we had some discussion about it. And she called me back some point later, I don't know how long, and said, man, I don't really know the timeline of this DEI job opening up, but we've got an HR role open. Would love for you to step into that, and then we can figure it out from there. And I said, man, I don't do HR, though. Like, I don't know what that means. And so their vice president of HR at the time called me and said, everything that you're doing is HR. You are leading people, you're strategizing, you're hiring, you're training, you're developing, you're terminating, you're doing so much of what is core functional HR. And we just think you're a great people leader, and we think that your talents would be valuable and you should just try it. And so I did. So I joined the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis as I don't remember my title, employment manager, something like that. Spent 6 years there, worked my way up, was assistant vice president of human resources, so overseeing all of our talent, development, training, engagement, and our DEI workforce. And then got an email one day that was me being recruited for this chief talent officer job at Penske Entertainment. And I'm going to be honest, I thought I was being catfished. I was like, who is this woman? And how does she have my email address?
Yeah.
There's a long story about that. But in the end, I wasn't being catfished. And I got on a call with Cindy Lucchese. And you have to know, I really wasn't actively searching. I think I had reached a point where I told myself a few months before that, like, maybe you should be open to other opportunities. And when I thought about what that might mean, for me, it meant doing the work that I do that I love, but in a space that I can be excited about. Banking is super important, and the organization was an incredible one and really important to the mortgage industry. But if I'm being honest, it just didn't rock my world.
Right. You're
So
not passionate.
Not passionate about it, but love the work that I did and love the people that I worked with. And so I got on a call with Cindy and we talked for an hour, and she said, oh my God, Allison's going to love you. Allison Melanchthon, who's our senior vice president of Penske Entertainment, a huge force, there and woman in sports. She said, oh, Allison's going to love you. If you want to continue to have these conversations, I want to put you in contact with Allison. So I did that. And I talked to her for over an hour, and she said, oh God, Mark's going to love you. And then I had a lunch with Mark, and the rest is kind of history. Actually, I spent a long Saturday kind of interviewing with them as well and learning about the organization, learning about the opportunity. And so kind of the rest is history. And for me, it was meant to be because of just how it happened. And it was very easy in terms of me talking about my experiences and how I view the HR space, how the type of leader I am in the space, and them talking to me about what they were looking for. And they were very much aligned. And just the fact that, I said that if I was going to consider an opportunity outside of the bank, it would be in something that was more exciting for me, that I could be a little bit more passionate about. And I started my career journey in sports. So it was like full circle moment of, wow, like just an example of you just keep working hard and you keep kind of collecting those experiences and you keep developing and maturing over time. And look how it kind of, for me, came full circle. And so now I'm doing what I've come to love, because I didn't start out in HR either. I've come to love that, found that in terms of a career industry, and then now doing it at a really high level in the sports industry. So super exciting.
To make sure all that college money didn't go to waste, right?
Amen. Amen. At some point, it has to pay off.
No, that's super exciting. I appreciate you telling me, that story and that journey, because, again, I've spoken with many leaders, sports leaders this year particularly, and just learning all the different ways that they have managed their careers to be in completely, totally different fields and still find themselves in leadership in sports. And I'm super intrigued by that. You are probably the first person I've talked to who actually said they got a degree in sports anything. I may be making that up. There may be a couple people, but there weren't many. Most of them were educated in something completely different: politics, education, anything. I mean, and then find how those skills transfer to a sports organization and really thrive in that space. So I really appreciate you sharing that journey. I want to talk a little bit more about the HR stuff, the human resources stuff, and mostly because I, like you said originally, wasn't even aware what all that entails. We hear HR all the time. Every corporate organization has a ridiculously huge HR department, but I don't have a full scope of what that really entails. So will you tell us more about all those things that you were doing back in the day that you didn't appreciate were HR, and how that aligned with your current role now as Chief Talent Officer at Penske?
I feel like HR kind of gets a bad rap. What people know about is payroll and benefits and compliance. And we have historically, as a function, gotten the reputation of the police, or, you've got this visual of the HR lady with the box coming to put all your stuff in it and kick you to the curb.
Right.
And there's some elements of that. But a really great HR function is a true partner to the business at every level. And that means understanding the business in terms of what its priorities are, what their goals are, and understanding every single person at the organization. So it's not just about being in supported leadership in your management group, but it's about understanding from the receptionist to the coordinators to the, every level of the organization. What are people, what are their motivations? What are their interests? What are their goals? And really being able to help be a conduit to creating an environment where people are feeling good about the work that they're doing and can find themselves a home or a space, a place in our organization where they can add value and see themselves in all that we do. So HR for me, it's about strategic thinking. It's about talent development. It's about, if I use some of the HR language, it's about succession planning. It's about compensation analysis and pay equity. It's about diversity, equity, and inclusion in every sense of that. It's about fun and enjoyment. We use the word engagement. What does that mean? At the end of the day, we want people to show up to work and be cool with it. Be happy to be here. So it's about finding ways to enjoy the work that we do. And again, there's still the compliance, and there's state and taxes and all the things that are probably boring to most people that we do have to worry about, and making sure that things are in order and that we're doing things in compliance with various regulatory policy. But the best part of our work shows up, for me, the best part of the value that we can add to an organization is better connecting our people with each other and their work, and to our leaders, and being able to work cohesively as an organization.
Well, that's probably the best definition of HR I've ever heard. That's pretty exciting. I mean, that sounds pretty good. That's not the typical. I think
it's pretty good.
But it's so important, right? I mean, it really is the heart of an organization. You can do all the selling and all the pitching and all the whatever, product development and R&D, but you got to have people.
You have to have people. We say it all the time. Our chairman, our owner, Roger Penske, is passionate about it. People are our most important asset, if you will. And
Absolutely.
So we've got to take care of our people. We have to know them, and we have to understand them, and we have to take it. And there's going to be hardness to any business, right? We can't do everything in every space in all the ways, but we can understand what we're working with and who we're working with and do the best that we can. And I just think it's super important in the HR function. We talked with my team about this all the time. We are creative thinkers, and we are problem solvers.
Yeah.
I get calls 20,000 times a day. I don't know how many calls I answer where at the end of the day, what are we dealing with? There's a problem, and they want my help and coaching and guidance on a solution. And we're in the business of helping our people, whether that's the CEO or the receptionist, to solution for their problems. And it's not about what's in the rule book all the time. It's about, let's hear people out, think creatively, live in the gray space, and get things done.
I love that. You talked about you and your team and how you're problem solvers and you do all these things. I really like that you speak about helping people and knowing people from the CEO to the receptionist, right? Like all the people, not just the big people,
all the people.
Not just the stakeholders, not just all the people, right? Because what you really appreciate is it takes all the people.
It takes all the people. And I even struggle in giving that kind of a range because it assumes, there's a bottom and a top, right? And I really don't look at it that way. It takes everybody,
Yeah.
and everybody's role is important.
Yeah.
Everybody's role is critical. We all have our swim lanes. We all have our strengths. And if everyone wasn't needed, those opportunities wouldn't be there. In our business, what's super unique about it, and this comes from banking and before that education, there's a little similarity there. But in our business, we've got such a diverse workforce in terms of industry. So what does that mean? You've got finance, you've got IT, you've got HR, you've got creative, you've got a ticket office, you've got premium services, you've got sales, you've got facilities, you've got grounds, you've got all these different types of workforce. We've got painters, we've got mechanics, we've got truck drivers. So everybody's important.
Yeah.
It takes a village, literally, a really big village. Actually, it's a small village. We employ about 250 full-time employees, and we get a lot done with 250 people.
That's actually incredible. Yeah,
it's
that's incredible. I would think it would be a whole team. I mean, 250 is not small.
We have about 250 full-time employees.
Wow.
We do staff up quite a bit for the month of May and the IndyCar race season, for sure. But in terms of our full-time staff, we employ about 250.
Yeah, that's impressive. So I want to talk about your team. You mentioned your team, and I want to know, what have you and your team accomplished in the time that you've been at Penske that you're particularly proud of? And then tell us some of the wins, right? Some of the wins you've had now, historically, or what you're thinking about doing and implementing in the future.
We are working on this presentation we're going to be doing in the next month called This Is Us. It's an initiative we started last year where the business presents to itself about what we do. So departments sign up to do their This Is Us, and we talk to the company about our team and the work that we do. And it's an effort to get everybody some visibility into departments that they might not work with or they might not know a ton about. So we're working on that. And one of the brainstorm activities we had the other day was like, what are some data points that we can give to the business that would be interesting about knowing what we do? And we were brainstorming how many new initiatives or offerings that we have offered the business, our employees, in the last 2 years. And we stopped counting at 20, which is a pretty significant number to say that we're a team of 7. It's a lean team. And when we look back over the last 2 years, this comes up in different categories, whether it's new benefits, new holidays that we are acknowledging, new training and development opportunities, new engagement opportunities. There's a range that 20 shows up in, but we have new opportunities for employees to give feedback and have a voice and be seen and be heard. So we've done over 20 new initiatives over the last 2 years. And I think that's a really big, mind you, the team has gone through so much change. I was new, right? And so we're getting our footing, and we had some new folks on the team. And so we've done over 20 new and different things for the employees at Penske Entertainment. I think they're enjoying it and loving it and appreciating the opportunities to be seen and heard and included. You know, a lot of the things that we're doing are coming as a result of us listening to what they want and what they are interested in. So new benefit, like onboarding a new benefit, our tuition assistance program. One of the coolest things about our tuition is, if I could tell you this little plug right here, one of the coolest things about our tuition assistance is that it's not a reimbursement program. Most organizations offer tuition assistance as a reimbursement. So you go pay it, you show us your receipts, we'll give you the money back. Ours is we front you the money, which was an interesting thing because at first I was like, well, that's going to require some trust, right? Like, what they doing with this money? And it was one of my first lessons in working with our CEO about how he thinks about our people and the business, which is, we trust our people. Like, why do we want them to incur unnecessary debt? If we're going to give them this benefit and give them access to these dollars for education that hopefully end up, being able to be useful to not only them, but ourselves as well, why wouldn't we front them the money? And maybe you have a bad apple or two, but at large, I don't think that. And so it was a really good learning opportunity for me in terms of how we view our business and how different that might have been in my previous experiences. So one cool benefit is just our tuition assistance program that really offers the financial support up front, and you don't have to be reimbursed for it. Juneteenth is a national holiday that we're newly recognizing and understanding just kind of all of that history and, having those intentional conversations. But again, we started our engagement survey 2 years ago. I think the organization has done it in the past, but it had been a long time. So we've incorporated, 6 to 7 new ways that employees can give us feedback, that we can listen to what's going well and where the opportunities are and respond. So I could go on and on about the new things we've done, but we've done some pretty important things. We just started something called Mingle on Main, where once a month on Wednesdays, we just come hang out at one of the pizza spots on Main Street and have some drinks and bowl and just kind of let our hair down and get to know each other better. These things might sound small, but they're super important to having a really connected team and a team that feels appreciated for all the hard work that they're doing. Because when I tell you, we work hard, we work hard.
That's awesome. It sounds like one of the most exciting and fun places to work in the city of Indianapolis. So I'm feeling a little jealous over here. I need some mingle on Main in my life.
Come mingle on Main.
So let's talk about you being a woman and a diverse woman in sports. Okay, let's talk about that. I appreciate that women in all industries face their own unique challenges regarding, bias and barriers, particularly related to their advancement in an organization. Sounds like you've been placed, and I often say divinely positioned, in a place where absolutely appreciates you, recognizes your value and your talent, but we still appreciate that there are still challenges that women are facing in every industry, every position, everything, every facet of business. And so as a woman in sports, what has been your experience in ascending to leadership? What have you found to be particular strengths that you bring to your teams or organizations? And are there any experiences that you'd be willing to share to exemplify some of the unique challenges or biases or microaggressions or all the terms we have to describe what women often face in their career path, whether in Indiana or anywhere else in the country?
Let me share this. So my first involvement in the world of sport was actually in undergrad, and I worked for our men's basketball program. So I started out being like a team manager, right? And that kind of evolved into other ways that I was able to support our head coach, and I'm looking at the travel schedule and just contracts and all kinds of things, which was a great opportunity. It was my first lesson in some of the challenges that might arise when you put a group of men and a young lady in a space together, traveling and hotels and practices and locker rooms and
all that comes with it.
And I'm going to tell you, it was not an easy experience. It really forced me to understand what my boundaries are. And then after you know what those are, once you decide what those are, how do you enforce them?
Yeah, express it.
How do you make sure that it's clear what my boundaries are? And how do you do that with people in authority?
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a really hard thing. And then I went on to also be graduate assistant men's basketball at Indiana State. And so we was able to carry those skills and just mindset into that experience too. But I will be honest and say graduating and seeking opportunities in sport did at that time kind of transition from looking for opportunities with sports teams to more corporate opportunities, which is why I ended up at the NCAA, right? It wasn't team facing and player facing and all that, because it was exhausting. The microaggressions as it relates to sexual interests and, just all of those things it was overwhelming. It was exhausting. I'm a vocal woman and I don't have a problem expressing myself, but it's tired. It's exhausting when you want to show up to work and do a good thing and exemplify, show your skills and show the value that you can add. But we focused on other things.
Yeah.
It's too much. So I did have this mindset of being over it, which was unfortunate. And I do remember going through a period of like being sad that what I was excited to get out into the workforce and experience just wasn't going to happen, because I was not wanting to just deal with that every day, all day. And it's funny because as I fast forward and became a dean at UIndy, one of my core responsibilities became oversight of our Title IX as it relates to student conduct and sexual assault awareness and harassment. I was a decision maker in, cases involving sexual assault and harassment allegations. And so that was all interesting because I had come from experiencing a lot of that. When we come full circle and now I've got this opportunity to come back in sport, I did think about is the landscape different? What will the challenges be? I didn't let it hold me back. I stepped right into it. I was super excited. My experiences over the course of my career have done more to serve me in terms of I've continued to grow, to understand who I am, what my authenticity looks like, what my boundaries are, how do I appropriately manage that in the workplace, how do I add value and be cool and chill and a part of the team and all of that. So I think my career journey has prepared me for the level that I'm at. I will say gratefully, I haven't personally experienced those things at this level, which I'm incredibly grateful for. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist out there. So I'm always sensitive to being a sounding board and coach for women who might be experiencing some of those types of aggressions in the workplace. I think what continues and what persists and what I have continued to experience over my career journey has more to do with the differences in how we perceive things like executive presence as it relates to women of color or people of color. How do we define that? What are we talking about? Can I be comfortable wearing my braids and my hoop earrings, and my fashion is a lot different than many other people that I share space with? And just some of the worry that I think we might have, in my view, unnecessarily, when we show up to the workplace that some of our counterparts don't necessarily ever have to think about. We were having a conversation about this the other day, and I was saying part of the problem when we talk about certain things as it relates to people of color, when we're talking about how people show up, presence, and just all kinds of things, we sometimes don't see those same things in our white counterparts. So we're talking about it when it comes to the people of color, but someone who's not of color might come to work with their hair all over their head, and we're not in an uproar about it. Right. We don't even notice it because it's not different than what we're used to. But we're so different than what they're used to that everything just seems heightened.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
It's constant conversation around how can we make sure that people can come to work every day and be themselves and add value and not be self-conscious and worried. I remember when I interviewed for my job at the bank, what I knew about the organization was that it was a bank, which my perception is pretty buttoned up, very conservative. And I had micro braids at the time. And I was panicking, and I was like, oh, and I had just gotten them in. And I think, if you got somebody, like, it takes some hours to get the braids in. And so I was panicking. I was like, should I take them out? And I'm like, I'm going to spend, I don't know how many hours taking these doggone braids out that I just got in for this interview. And I ended up not taking them out because I said, you know what? This is my summer hair. When I go on vacation, this is what I like. This is what works for me. And I'm going to get some next summer. And if I'm working there, they need to know that. So I'm going to keep these braids in. I mean, it took me a few hours to get there. I was like, no, I'm going to keep these braids in. And if that's a deal breaker, then that's a space that I don't need to be in.
That's right.
Because that means I can't bring my full self. That means that I have to keep part of me at home. And it's a pretty important part. My hair is important to me. The way I look is important to me. And when I go on vacation, having a hairstyle that I can manage is important to me. So we going to wear these braids and we going to interview and we going to get this job, or we not, and that's going to be okay. And gratefully, I got the job. But these are the things that I feel like some of our, just being honest, white counterparts may not have to concern themselves. Maybe they do. I've not heard those stories. And so, we have a lot of conversation about how we can help manage that as an employer and make sure that people can come to work and be themselves. I remember having a conversation with Mark. I report to Mark Miles, our president and CEO. And it was some months in to me starting the role. I don't remember how it came up, but I said that I felt good about being there and I felt like I could be myself. And he was like, you do? Like, you feel like you can, show up and be yourself? I said, I do. And I appreciated the interaction because what I felt like was he was happy that I was having that experience because that was what he wanted for me and for others. And so it starts at the top with understanding that everybody doesn't know everything about everything, but all of us have a seat at the table to have the conversation and to try to create safe spaces for everybody.
Well, and that's what the things like Mingle on Main allow to happen. You allow counterparts and colleagues who may never experience in their actual personal life the people that they're exposed to at work because you are in a diverse environment. And that's the beauty of it all.
That's the beauty.
Yeah. I want to touch on one thing because I've had plenty of women on this show and I've never ever, I've asked about microaggressions and all the barriers and biases of everybody. And nobody, not a single person has brought up what you brought up, which is the sexual or not even harassment, but just the interplay that happens when you're a woman in male-dominated environments. It is real. And I know it's real. You know it's real. You've just talked about it. But I've never had a woman bring it up or talk about it, and that's fine. But I appreciate that you acknowledge that, because I just want to make the point here that it does not have to get all the way to sexual harassment, or you're worried about your job, or you're just the slight comments and the extra looks and all the other stuff that comes. That stuff's real. And you were in the extreme environment of just straight athletic men, like everybody would expect that. But that happens in corporate environments all day, every day, with executives buttoned up with suits on. That stuff is real. And I just want to make that point, because I've never had anybody bring it up. And it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And one thing about me, I'm a real woman.
Yeah.
I'm a real person, and I'm going to keep it real.
Yeah.
And it was a part of my experience. It's something that I think about as being potentially a part of other women's experience.
That's right.
And wanting to help safeguard against. And you're so spot on when you say it doesn't have to be whatever we might consider full-blown sexual harassment or stuff. It doesn't even have, but there's a lot that can happen on that spectrum, on that range of interaction that can make someone uncomfortable. And it's a real thing. And, I just want our women in our organization and other women that I know in other spaces to know that we have to be clear about our boundaries and find the best way to make those boundaries clear, and tap into women and other people that you trust to bounce those things off of, to figure out how, the best way to go about it if you are having an issue. But it's absolutely real. And it's something it's unfortunate, but it can be worked through, I think, with education and, again, good boundary setting and
communication. Because you got to communicate to somebody, hey, you can't talk to me like that. Or that's inappropriate.
I'm going to be honest, and this might not be popular opinion, but I think it's possible that somebody just don't know, doesn't realize, right? They might think they're paying you a compliment and have the best of intention. We have something that we talk about all the time in our organization, which is assume positive intent. And a lot of times if you operate from that space, it makes lots of things better. And it's very possible that everybody is not just attempting to be egregious in their interaction. Some people might need to know, right? They might not be aware. They might need to understand what you feel about, again, your boundaries. That's why I say a lot of times it can be something that can be worked through. But the idea that we would just sit with these things and be silently experiencing things that make us uncomfortable, I hate that idea.
What I also very much appreciate from that whole story and this whole discussion is, again, how diversity is so important. With you having those real life experiences and then being in a position to be a decision maker on sexual harassment that may be happening in a college environment or whatever the case may be, that's why diversity is so important.
It's so
because
important.
You are going to be a lot more sensitive and appreciate and can read between the lines and know what's true and what's not true because you've had those experiences. If you've never been in those positions, if you've never had somebody talk to you inappropriately or approach you inappropriately, then you can't necessarily appreciate how situations come about in sometimes really legitimate ways. But I mean, people working together, men and women.
People travel.
Absolutely,
I was saying that even
everything.
when I was working on the sports team, I was traveling with the team. We have teams that travel, teams that they're not the drivers, right? We have professional people who travel together, lodging and all the things. And so it's important to just understand and having safe spaces and knowing boundaries and being able to communicate about those things.
I just want to thank you for bringing that up because that's real and I absolutely appreciate that. Now it's time for a break.
Get caught up on the state's top business news every business day with the Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand podcast. Available now at InsideIndianaBusiness.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back with Kristin Weeden, Chief Talent Officer at Penske Entertainment, on this third anniversary episode of the Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Let's shift a bit. As you know, your colleague, Penske's Senior Corporate Counsel and Chief Diversity Officer, Jimmy McMillan, is one of my very closest friends, a great legal mentor of mine. We've known each other forever, it seems like forever. Jimmy was, as I mentioned to you previously, one of the first guests on the podcast, and he's been back a second time to actually do a reverse podcast where he interviewed me a year ago. So Jimmy's given a lot of voice to the exceptional work that you and he and Doug Bowles and Mark Miles and Allison and so many of the other people that you've mentioned are doing at Penske related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just making the track and that experience is more inclusive to all, right? So how do you, in your role as Chief Talent Officer, interconnect or partner with Jimmy in his role as Chief Diversity Officer to ensure that Penske recruits and retains top diverse talent, that you have all the career exposure opportunities that you mentioned just earlier, from being a mechanic to the finance department to all the things that are there? And are there any particular programs that you all are working on collectively that would be important for the Central Indiana community to be aware of?
Let me just say, we love Jimmy.
Yes, we do.
We love Jimmy. Jimmy is all the things. Jimmy is an incredible champion and advocate of all things DEI, not only for us, but just for the community.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he is such a voice and such a force, and I'm grateful for him. His office is across from mine. So in terms of partnership and collaboration, I feel like Jimmy has been my brother since day one on this topic and off of this topic. And so we are just freaking frack when it comes to this topic. We support each other. We brainstorm on all of those topics and how we want to approach it and how we want to present it to our leadership and what are the different things that we want to do. Jimmy's focus, he is passionate about mentorship. He is passionate about education and bringing as many people along as we absolutely can. And so one of the things that Jimmy's really great at is the network of having a diverse community for us to tap or school on different topics or be able to tap into. Super, super important. We partner on a few different things. So we have an effort where we intend to hire, we want 40% of our new hires to be diverse. And so Jimmy's a really big part of that effort. And obviously myself and my team are a really big part of that effort. We have another effort where we want to diversify our fan base. And so there's a really big push each year. For the last few years, we've gotten 10,000 new diverse fans to the track. Jimmy's an incredible part of that. We have a big push for an increase in our diverse spend. So how can we spend our dollars and convert diverse communities, making sure we have diverse partners in different areas of our business. And so whether it's dollars, fans, jobs, we are thinking about diversity in all of those ways, and we partner on it in every way. There's a program that started a couple of years ago called Diverse Leadership in Motorsports Program. It's a program that we're really, really proud of, where we are super intentional about employing, as a part of our college program, our internship program, ethnically diverse students. So there is a selection process that Jimmy and I are involved in, where we're interviewing, just trying to get students who could use the support and the mentorship on a track, interest in sports, and doesn't have to just be Penske Entertainment. One of the coolest things about the program, once we get them there, so they're employed in different parts of the business. It could be golf and grounds, it could be facilities, it could be sales, it's diversity, it's ticket office, it's marketing, it's digital, it's social media, it's all the things. But then we kick off this programmatic piece of DLMP where we have cohort meetings biweekly where Jimmy and I talk to the students about topics that are particular to them. What sorts of challenges are we facing as people of color trying to graduate college and get a foot in the door and start a career? What are you guys experiencing? What did we experience? What tips can we give you? What should you be focused on? What's the real in the real? What's not going to be said? Trying to really give them a good foundation to set them up for success. And then we have a lot of programming where we take them to the Colts, we take them to the Pacers, we take them to the Indians. Beth Peretta, who's a woman in racing, we bring some programming from her to talk to them about her experience and her involvement in racing. And so we try to expose them not just to racing, but to other elements in sport, because we know that we might, at the end of the day, we might not have the full-time opportunity when they're done. But if we could have helped be a conduit and or a relationship starter between them and someone else that leads to an opportunity down the line, we feel great about that. And so it's one of the programs that I think Jimmy would say, I know I am, we're really proud of. We're actually going to be having a barbecue at Mark's house in 2 weeks to do our finale of this year's cohort. And so every year we get better at it, but it's super important and it's super unique. And with the climate and how things are going, it's going to be super interesting on our ability to continue in that way, because it is it's specific for students of color. So, but we're going to do it as long as we can do it, and we have support from the top that we ain't worried about what else is going on. We're going to keep doing what we know is right.
Ride it till the wheels fall off.
Fall off.
So let's talk about that. So we know that car racing as a sport has not been historically diverse, right? And while that's changing with a large part due to the intentionality of what you just mentioned, you and Jimmy and so many others being intentional and on purpose about having programs like DLMP and so on. I think that while racing is behind in a lot of sports, it's still changing and diversifying in every way, in all the ways that you mentioned as well. So as a diverse leader of an industry that is as far or even maybe further behind than some other sports with regard to diversity, do you feel armed? And I think you've already mentioned this just in your conversation, but I want to ask it. Do you feel armed and supported by your organization's management in your role to make real change? I mean, you just talked about this program, right? And I ask that because there are so many people who are in DE&I roles or HR roles, but are tasked to effectuate change with regard to DE&I, but they don't really feel empowered to do that. They have the title, but when they promote programs like you just mentioned, there's never money or there's never interest or there's always some reason why we just can't do it. So tell me how and why you feel empowered to really make change, which you clearly are.
I absolutely feel empowered, and I don't want to speak for Jimmy, but I think he'd say the same thing. And it's super important. I feel empowered because in many ways, we do put our money where our mouth is. But at the same time, it's not all about money. It's also about the decisions that we make. In different scenarios, there's all kinds of decisions that could be made where you kind of show your cards.
Right.
And so our leadership has been incredibly supportive of saying, hey, if something's going on that we need to talk about, let's talk about it. We want to make the right decisions. This is the culture that we want to have for our fans, for our employees. And if there's anything going on that challenges that doesn't support that, we need to know about it. We need to talk about it, and we need to make some decisions that take us from that space. So, and that's not an easy thing, because that could look like impacting a ticket holder. I mean, that could look like a lot of different things. I won't go down the list, but it could look like a lot of different things. And we have been in those conversations and made really good decisions that support diversity. And so I absolutely feel supported. And the whole DEI topic and conversation can look so different in different organizations. Some places it's ERG, some places it's committees, it's different things to talk about it. One of the cool things about our organization is we don't love the idea of voices getting lost in bureaucracy. If someone has a problem, you can go to any one of us and have a conversation, open door, including Mark, Roger, all of our leadership, ownership, express a concern or an idea, and action can be taken. It doesn't get lost in some formal process or some group. And I'm not saying those things don't have value, because they do, but we prefer a more direct approach, an open door policy, if you will, with our people to say, hey, let's talk about the ideas that you want to do or the challenge that you're having or the frustration that you have going on, so we can make a difference. Mark, our CEO, he is very particular about, like, let's be decisive. Let's be clear. Let's be specific. And it shouldn't take all this time to get X thing done.
Right.
And so that helps us really meet our needs as it relates to the DEI efforts that we have quickly and effectively, I think.
That's really awesome, because that in and of itself indicates the type of culture you have. That is part of the challenge in any big organizational culture is that the people at the bottom don't feel like they can go speak to or don't even know the people at the top, right? I mean, again, given how big your organization is, international and all that, I get that's a bit challenging. But that kind of open door policy speaks a lot to the culture of your organization, where the landscaper guy or the facilities guy is like, oh, I'm going to go talk to Mark about this.
And I'm telling you, it's the absolute truth. I'll tell you what I combat, what I try to have to combat is, some people are going to be intimidated or nervous about that just by sheer title.
Yeah, sure,
right?
sure.
And so I have to tell people all the time, like, he is not wrapped up in his own title. We were having a conversation earlier about something that had to do with something being called the office of the president. He's like, never. What is that? No, like, we don't need all that. He wants people to know that he's as easy as having a conversation with. Now, there's going to be spaces where sometimes it doesn't happen because somebody, he's the president, CEO. And,
sure.
I want to work with our people to break that down because it's how we build those relationships and see change. So I think it's great, but it's also, I don't know, I kind of think it's unique. Maybe it's not, but I think it's unique. And so because it's unique, you got to get people there too. So that's a part of the work that I'm doing every day when I'm talking with people, is also trying to break down the silo that can exist between the employee and the leadership, right? Sure. Because we're everyday people and we make decisions, easy ones and hard ones every single day. And we want their concerns to be a part of that. And so he's absolutely open door, as am I, as am Jimmy, as are Jimmy and Doug and, all of us. It's a familial environment and it's a cool thing to be a part of.
I'm going to just say it again, culture. I mean, culture is a real thing. And it sounds like you all have just a truly amazing culture for your employees, for the fans that you're trying to entertain, for all the things. And I think that's great. I mean, we've talked about it all the time. Top down. It starts from the top. And if you've got the top leader who's like, look, I'm not all caught up in myself, so you don't need to be all
caught up in that. Let's talk about what you want to talk about right. So we can get something done.
But that in and of itself is culture. I mean, there are so many organizations where an employee would dare not ever go talk to an executive or a leader, and I think that's what changes culture, is getting leaders that are not caught up in themselves or their title or their position. Like, look, I'm here to do a job just like you are. I need you just like you need me. How do we get to the bottom of things? And that is a culture shift. That's not, our parents would never have just rolled up on the CEO and been like, look, we need to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you know what? It was one of the selling points for me in the opportunity. I understood they weren't interested in an HR leader that was driven by the handbook. They were interested in an HR leader that wants to have the conversation. And regardless of what the handbook say, let's figure out what's the right thing to do and the best thing to do.
Right, because we might need to fix the handbook. Exactly.
And so it's refreshing.
That's awesome. I'm excited to know that that's the kind of experience that you are having, that Jimmy's having, that is there to be had. I think there will be a lot of people who listen to this and like, I need to work there, or I need to find a place in Indiana. In Indiana that's like that.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I don't know that it's like that. Like, it does seem very unique and very special.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Coming into this opportunity, and even as I invited friends and family to the 500 my first year, they were like, we ain't going to that meeting. And I'm like, oh, Lord. And so, now that I've been in the mix for a couple of years, I've been able to be a part of the conversation and can say, it's not that. And we're not perfect, but we're actively working at where we have opportunity. And it's really a great place to be. We're making strides in literally every area, whether it's diversity or just our culture, moving the sport, making changes in that space. And so it's an exciting time to be a part of an organization like ours, but it's not what it once might have been, and really wanting people to know that. And we have real opportunities, and we have seats for people who are willing to work hard and grow in this industry.
So I want to circle back a bit. We talked about authenticity a bit earlier, and we talk about authenticity a lot in the space of DE&I and making change and allowing people to be their best selves when they come to work, etc. But we also know authenticity takes transparency and vulnerability, right? You had to go through several changes to get to the point where, oh, no, I'm showing up in these braids and we just going to see what happens, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's real. It takes some vulnerability. It takes some transparency. So I want to know, how necessary do you think transparency and vulnerability are to authenticity in a way that truly helps effectuate corporate policies that advance real goals toward making a more fair, equitable, inclusive environment for your employees? And then how have you been able to maintain your authenticity and transparency as an African American or Black woman in leadership of a historically non-diverse sport? You've spoken a lot about your experience, but speak to that piece.
On the piece about the importance of transparency, we had a cohort meeting yesterday with our DLMP. One of the questions that they asked were, how can I get comfortable showing up as myself? I don't know how to. I don't know. I feel like I have to be this type of poised and stiff, if you will. You know, I realized through that conversation that was how they equated professionalism.
Yes, yeah, sure.
And so we talked a lot about, to me, that's not what it is. Professionalism, first of all, it's important to have a level of transparency about yourself and how you show up, because we can't get to know who you really are. We can't get to a space where you can even know, can you be comfortable here or can you not? Because you're not bringing your real self to work every day. Now, there is a such thing as professionalism. To me, what does that look like? That looks like appropriate use of language for the situation, right? Reading the room, being, showing up and having a certain presence about yourself. We talked a lot about personal branding, right? So think about, like, what do you want someone's takeaway to be with an interaction with you? Everything from the way you look to the way you speak. So you have to have a level of transparency, and the vulnerability comes in my opinion, for people of color, in that we might be worried that we sound ghetto. We might be worried that our use of words and slang won't be understood, or we might slip and say, X, Y, and Z. And then one of the things I was coaching the students on is making sure that their social circle includes people who are like-minded in their quest for success, advancement, whatever that looks like for them, because then you have more than just your 9-to-5 interaction. That is an opportunity for you to exercise what appropriateness looks like. And a lot of times, I'm just going to be honest, my experience and my perspective, a lot of our young people don't have that. They go home to the environments that they're going home to, and there might not be a lot of people around. I mean, for me, leaving Chicago was rooted in, I got to get out because I don't want to become what I'm next to, right? And so that makes it hard. But you do have to be a little vulnerable, because what is unique and true to you might not resonate with the next person. But what offsets that, in my opinion, is the value that you bring to the organization. And when you add value to a space, the other stuff becomes
a non-issue,
mm-hmm. less noticeable. You can have less insecurities about it because you're super secure in the value that you bring. And so that's where your focus should be. Let's focus on the value that you bring. Show up as yourself, your best self. But let's focus on honing your skills, your network, and adding value, because all that other stuff, I had an experience. I won't name the employer. I wear big gold earrings. They used to be bigger. And I had someone tell me once, if I didn't stop wearing those earrings, I was never going to do more, because it was ghetto and I needed to look different. And I really sat with that, because I was like, I like my earrings.
Right.
Like, it's almost
and
part of who I am.
And how they hurting you?
What's happening here? How is this interrupting the business that we're doing? Now, it's a lesson in feedback, right? We say feedback is a gift, and it is. But you also have discernment, and you can pick and choose how you use or don't use feedback. And I could have said, you know what? That's a good idea. I don't want to be perceived as ghetto. Let me take these earrings off. And I'm not saying that's the worst decision. I love my earrings. And I don't understand, until somebody can explain to me how this is impacting my work, I'm wearing these earrings. And years later, I remember chairing a committee. And she was at that point, I was a dean, and she was on my committee. And I just remember, I wasn't petty. I didn't say nothing, but I'm just sitting here thinking like, ooh, I guess those earrings didn't hold me back so much.
Exactly, because I'm sitting right here with you.
And so you talk about vulnerability, exactly my point. I'm sitting right here with you. So vulnerability shows up in lots of different ways, but your willingness to be who you are, even if other people don't understand it, even if other people have an issue with it, if you are adding value and doing the right thing and contributing, I'd be less concerned about that. But I do think that we have to focus on how we add value. That is how we excel out here.
I tell students all the time, you have to lead with excellence, right? If you lead with excellence, all that other stuff fades to the back. Yeah. And
you can be impressive with your big old earrings on.
Exactly. And I think that's interesting because when I became an attorney, we had, I don't know, a designer or a stylist. That's what a stylist come in, and and there were people who absolutely needed her help because they had no sense of style. I think I'm fairly stylish, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. Again, always being open to learn and grow. And she's a professional stylist. She's on TV shows and she's got to know some things. But her feedback to me was the exact same. I don't necessarily wear big earrings, but I always wear dangling earrings. I very seldom ever wear a stud. It's always going to be a dangling earring. And she told me people aren't going to be able to focus on what you're saying because they're going to be looking at your earrings. And I had the exact same. I said, look, if people can't concentrate on what I'm saying because they then that issue is theirs. Like, they got a problem, not me. Like, that's craziness. But it shocked me and it irritated me. Like, and if that's the worst you can say about me, is that then I'm doing pretty good. I know that's right.
I'm doing pretty good. And, I'm with you. And there's going to be feedback that we do need to take, and it's going to be helpful for us. But you got to be clear about who you are. And you have to be clear about what journey you're on. And I think focused on the things that really make you stand out, which are your skills, your talents, how you're showing up in an impressive way, hard work. There's no substitution for hard work. And all the other stuff becomes noise, in my opinion.
But, I've always, similar to you, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be in the spaces that I'm in, to show people that you don't have to look a certain way to be able to be successful. And if I can do what you do and still rock my gold earrings, then hey,
why not?
It's a win-win. Like, what's the problem, right? So I appreciate all that. Again, I think these are the small things where diversity truly adds value, and things that I'm sure many of our listeners will be like, really? They getting coached on their earrings and their hair?
Listen,
it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And that's the whole piece about the DEI too, right? Like, there's so many people who have no idea that this is what we're really wrestling with.
Yes.
And when you talk about, maybe it does sound silly. And so then how silly is it that we have spaces where people have to wrestle with it? And I take pride. I think another part of your question had to do with my authenticity and my leadership role. It's super important to me. Anybody who knows me, anybody who's worked with me knows, like, Kristin is going to be Kristin. She's going to show up as her full self. But every situation calls for it, probably a little different version of me, right? I remember being in a meeting with Mark, and afterwards he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do you mean?" And he was like, "You were just so serious." Like, yeah, he was like, "You were like," he hadn't seen me. We were talking about a very serious thing. And normally we're pretty,
light. Yeah.
Light.
Yeah.
So different scenarios call for different versions. And I'm absolutely able to show up in different spaces how I feel like I need to be to execute at a high level. So don't confuse the J's, because I wear those too. Right. Which was what I was going to say. It's kind of important to me that I can have those freedoms and that I'm comfortable with that, because for me is how I get other diverse people to see we can be in these spaces. It's possible.
That's right.
It is possible. And I do talk to young people about credibility and the importance of it, and that you do have to build it, right? And there is a level of, there's probably some things that Jimmy and I can do or wear or say or whatever that, as an intern, you probably should not.
Right.
we have built those relationships, and we have that credibility. And whether Jimmy has on J's or I have on J's, the contracts getting done, the business getting handled, and the trust from our leaders are there. So there is something to be said about trust building and credibility as you grow in your career. But I show up how I show up because, one, it's who I am, but also I love the twinkle that I see in certain people's eyes, not just students, but professionals, when they like, you were doing what? You in that role? I love it, quite honestly, and wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I spent time talking to so many students and young emerging leaders. I was just with Kelly Doucette with the Urban League, and she was like, Angela's a partner, and yes, she wears her braids. And yeah, I do. And we probably do not appreciate, although, when comments like that are made, I acknowledge it, how empowering that may be for people who see us, where we're never going to be in a conversation with them. We'll never know. We'll never experience it. But they're like, I just met a Black woman attorney who's a partner, and she had straight up braids, like not even micro braids, like feet in, like, straight up.
You see what I got going on this week? Listen.
But I think that is empowering. And it is some of the leverage and the leeway you have when you have established credibility. And I'm with you, because young leaders often want to kick the door down and start making change I'm like, hold on. You got to lead with excellence first. You got to show your value before anybody cares what you think or say. You've got to show your value to the organization. And once that credibility is established, like you said, then you've got room to say, you know what, I've been thinking, and I think there are better ways. There are ways we can improve this system, this process, this experience, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't come immediately.
It doesn't.
And young leaders need to appreciate that you can't just come in your first year and try to change anything.
It's the hardest part. You talk about what's the role of HR, and a big part of the responsibility I feel that I have is developing those younger generations or newer generations of the workforce. And it's such a hard thing. We've got multiple generations in the workforce right now, and everybody's working and operating from a different lens. And I feel such a responsibility. When I look at the workforce, you've got boomers and beyond that are at the top, right? And then you've got, I don't even know what the name of the newest
the Zers
is,
or after. I don't know.
And there's a gap. You know what I mean? There's a gap. And it's like in both directions. It's like, how do I get this group in a positioned to build credibility with this group who at the time and currently are the decision makers, right? So you've got to understand that these people are the ones that are making the decisions, and you've got to find a way to build credibility to have a seat at the table. Meanwhile, also saying they've got some good ideas. There are some things going on that we should listen to, but how do we get there? It's a hard thing. But I need for our people to know, like, building credibility, being excellent, being impressive. I say that a lot. Finding the way that you can add value to a space has to be your priority.
That's right. That's got to be what you lead with, right?
Lead with that.
Yeah.
And you will win.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kristin, it's really been fantastic. I appreciate that we've had this conversation. I want to ask you, as we come to a close, again, it seems like Penske and all the things you are doing out there are such forward thinking and forward moving. But I'd like to know if there are any other corporations that you've seen do things pretty well that you emulate, or if there are things that you think you all have done well that could be more broadly distributed or leveraged in our broader community that would truly help improve, increase DE&I inclusion for all at every level in our community.
Sometimes it's hard to know what's going on behind the curtain. And when we talk about employment, one of the things that people in our community struggle with is not seeing diversity in leadership roles. And I think we've done an incredible job at that and continue to get better at it. I think that in order to influence change in any organization, if you don't have diverse people, that's women, that's people of color, that's LGBTQ+, if you don't have that representation in your leadership, then you're doing your organization a disservice, because there's no way you can understand what the challenges are and how to combat them. So you can have a program, you can have a strategy, a strategic plan, a budget, you can have all that. But if you don't have the right minds tackling the problems, solutioning for the concerns, I'm not convinced that we really we serious about this. And so no one has, I don't think, ever said this out loud, but I believe that they were absolutely interested in a diverse person in my role. Like, I think that was intentional. And that's my personal belief. And I'm grateful for it. And I think it's important because for the same reason why it's important to have a Jimmy in his role, the same reason it's important to have a woman like Allison Melanchthon in her role. We all bring different lenses and experiences, and we all have, every person on the planet has our own biases too, right? And so when you have that diversity in leadership, we can help offset those things and call it out and call a spade, but make strong and solid decisions. So there's so many, can't even count, how many things we could be doing as organizations to tackle diversity. But I think for the same reason you want the best and the brightest as your CFO is the same reason that you want diversity at your leadership table, because that expertise. And when it comes to diversity, expertise is not taught in the classroom.
That's right. It's lived experience.
It's lived experience.
Yeah.
And you don't have what I have. And I don't have what the next person has. And so when that group, we have tackled situations that have come up where we have rallied and had to have a conversation about what this is we're talking about and dealing with. And I've been asked the question, well, how does that feel or impact, or how should we think about it? And I'm grateful that we have an organization that is operating that way, because without being able to call a me or a Jimmy or a Allison or a Laura, who's our CFO, whoever, we don't get those answers. And then we might not make the right decisions. And so there's a ton of stuff you could do, everything from programming and communities committees and ERD, all that. And those are all great things. But I think that if you don't have diversity at the leadership table, you are not really trying to make progress and real change in your organization. And I think we were doing a good job at that.
Kristin, I got to tell you, this has been one of the most powerful conversations I've had. It is super exciting to talk with you. I'm glad I had you back, because this is a completely different conversation than what Jimmy and I had, but so important and so powerful and so necessary. So thank you so much for being my guest on the 3rd anniversary, the 36th episode, which is crazy to me. Thank you for being here. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you again to Kristin Weeden, and thanks to you for joining us on this 36th episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Please come back next month for another conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Central Indiana business community.